Okie dokie, and now we travel to China for this last test and its material on Taoism and Confucianism. Just like in the other test, we're going to see a development of Confucianism out of Taoism because Confucius was a Taoist. Now, really, this lecture is just kind of an introduction to the Chinese way of life, setting the stage for a lot of stuff that we'll cover in more depth with Taoism and Confucianism. But really, this entire section is just kind of the Chinese way of life, because Taoism doesn't have doctrines of salvation and holy text in the sense of purely religious text, where it is seen as a divinely inspired scripture, like we've seen from the Middle Eastern or Indian-based religions. And so what we have is really just the Chinese way of life. And what we're going to see with Taoism in particular is it's about living with nature. And so we have the idea of you either live with nature or against nature. You're doing the right things, and so you would be living with nature, and you would be blessed by having a long, healthy life when you live with nature. You go against nature, then it's going to get you. It's going to wear you down. And so it's really just living with nature. Now, to separate Taoism and Confucianism just a bit, we're going to see that Taoism is the way of nature and Confucianism is the way of mankind, or the way of people. And so Confucianism is a little bit more into ethics and politics, but within nature, like the Taoist framework or the Taoist mindset. And so there's a basic distinction between the two. But again, I cannot stress enough, Confucius was a Taoist. So, real quick, speaking of religions, Buddhism has been the biggest thing in China for about the last 2,000 years. So on top of the history that you see before you here for the last 4,500 years, Buddhism really caught on almost immediately when it got to China. The Taoists accepted it a lot quicker than the Confucians did, but within another 100 or 200 years, the Confucians were totally on board with Buddhism and a lot of the basic concepts. So remember, Emperor Ashoka sent out missionaries, and he was in the 200s BC, BCE, but within another 100, 200 years, certainly by the time we turn from BC, BCE to AD or CE, Buddhism is taking over, and you can be a Taoist, Confucian, and Buddhist all at the same time, they say, with no contradiction. So, Taoism, it is pronounced Taoism. Briefly, let's talk about this. You see a quick pronunciation guide here. So it's pronounced Taoism, not Taoism. And the reason for this is there's two different English translations or ways of translating. Wade Giles came about maybe 100, 120, about 120 years ago, and it was done in England, but it sounds nothing like spoken Chinese. And so about 50 years ago they redid it and gave us the pinyin system. And so often when you're reading online, if you're reading your text and such, it'll say a word, and then it'll have a WG in parentheses or a PY in parentheses, and indeed there are tons of parentheses on your test. So I keep it going with stuff like this. Chi, it's spelled QI, really kind of pronounced CHI, chi. So, tons of parentheses on your test. But these translation systems, we're all trying to translate a Chinese character into a Romanized or Latinized or Westernized alphabet system. And so these are just two different ways of doing it. And so yes, it very much looks like Taoism, but no, it is pronounced Taoism. And we'll see some of these other basic illustrations in terms and words and people's names as we go through the Taoist stuff. So, Let's talk about this timeline right quick, and then we'll talk about the dynasties, and I got some maps pulled up for us. But big picture, 2,500 year history here. The I Ching is a text we'll talk about probably in the next lecture. And then the Shang dynasty, Zhou dynasty, Lao Tzu, Confucius, and Buddha lived about the same time. You see, Buddha died just a few years before Confucius did. The Warring States period, a big part of this lecture. And Chang Tzu, we'll talk about him next time. And the Qin, or Qin Emperor. And I don't know where the other half of that date went. 221 to 201, 206 BC, BCE. So I'll fix that before I put your final edition of this review on canvas for you. Well, I want you to know that all these dynasties always existed, but when we have the Shang dynasty from 1700 to 1100, and then the Zhou dynasty from 1100 to 200, both these dynasties still existed. The Qin dynasty exists as well. The Han dynasty took over after the Qin dynasty, and a handful of other ones. But all these dynasties always existed. It's just how much land they owned, or how much land they ruled over. And so let's look at this. And this has more specific dates, slightly different dates, but we're going to stick to the ones I give you on the timeline, just because it's 1700 to 1100, 1100 to 200, and even here, again, the Qin Emperor was only for 20 years, 15, 20 years. So, let's look at this. You've got to be kidding me. Let's look at this map. This is one of my favorite ones. We see Tibet here, and here you see exactly how big Tibet was before China stole it in the 1940s, 1950s. We'll talk about that at the end of the Chinese stuff, the end of the Confucian lectures as well. But you see Mongolia up here on the other side of the Great Wall. But here we have in reddish, orangish, whatever that is, they have 1500 to 1027. Again, mine 1700 to 1100. But this is the era of the Shang dynasty just because they owned more land. They were ruling over more land than the rest of the people. The Zhou, and here we even have ZHOU on my handout. I have CHOU, but it's pronounced with almost like a faint J. Very faint CH or J, Zhou dynasty. Well, they all always existed, but you see this blue here, the Qin or Qin dynasty, and again, very small period of ruling, but very important, 15 years, is kind of spread out all over. And I got this from, just Googling map of ancient China dynasties here, and you can see how really every year the borders of each of these dynasties kind of shrank and grew and changed really every single year. And so, for example, here we have the Qin dynasty, the darker blue, we'll call it, kind of a teal, spread out into these four sections. Well, over here, it's kind of in pink, and it's just this section up in here, and really a corner here. But it's not spread out over here, and this one even highlights how many other ruling families or dynasties were involved at the time. And so we see this shift every year, really, in the dynasties. So when I tell you things like the Shang dynasty, again, my years 1700 to 1100, they were just the most powerful family ruling over the most amount of land, and so we say it's their era. So let's talk about this. let's get into more of the religious elements. You see here, the Shang Dynasty. There was this concept called Qian Ming. Almost kind of, Tian is almost kind of like 10, but again, kind of a faint Qian Ming, almost has a CH there. But mandate of heaven is what it means. Tian means nature, heaven, sky. But it's translated as the mandate of heaven. So there was always this concept of Qian Ming, the mandate of heaven, the law of heaven, we could say. And Qian Ming said which family was in charge. And this was all based on their de, their virtue, their morality, their honor, we could say. And so when a family, the ruling family, lost their de, they lost their virtue, they were taken out of power by Qian Ming, the mandate of heaven, saying they've lost their honor, they're no longer fit to rule China, and so they're out. Another family kind of gets bumped up and takes over. And so there was always this concept of Qian Ming, but during the time of the Shang Dynasty, 1700 to 1100, we get this, for the first time in Chinese history, almost a godlike being called Shang Di. Shang Di. And that's literally just the last name Shang, and then Di, virtue. And so this almost godlike figure, the virtuous Shang, we could say, was a more manifestation or personified version of this ancient idea of Qian Ming, the mandate of heaven. And so this kind of impersonal Qian Ming becomes a more personal Shang Di, where it's almost kind of a Western idea of a god. Well, after the Shang Dynasty was kicked out of power because they lost their de, the Zhou Dynasty starts up. They really just kind of ditched the idea of Shang Di and said Qian Ming was always just the Tao. The Tao. Tao is translated as the way, the pattern, the process, the force. And so you can see how the Tao, for Taoism obviously, the way, the pattern could be seen as the mandate of heaven. It's the pattern of heaven. It's the process of heaven, the process of nature. And so we kind of have this idea that the Tao was always in charge. It's just the Shang Dynasty named this manifestation after themselves, kind of arrogantly, right? Kind of imagine that. The Shang Dynasty says this first almost god-like figure was named after them. So we see these dynasties changing all the time throughout this 2,000 years. Even the last 2,000 years, many more ruling families kicked up. Some of them took over and ruled everything for a time period in there. But this continued on up until about 100 years ago in Chinese history. This idea of the dynasties changing, the borders changing all the time. So that's the Shang Dynasty. Now, almost everything that we talk about for Taoism happened during the Zhou Dynasty, 1100 to 200. This is when Lao Tzu lived, Confucius lived, the Warring States period, which we're turning to now. That Tao Te Ching was written, Chang Tzu wrote his stuff. So the Zhou Dynasty is very important to the history of China and the history of Taoism. Now, the Zhou Dynasty is just the ruling family during this time period, and they ruled during the Warring States period. And this is exactly what it sounds like. It's a Warring States period. And so really what we have is kind of a civil war on a more a global scale, in the sense of covering more of the land that is now China. but it's warring families, warring states, what we would call a civil war. And so there was tons of drama, there was tons of political turmoil, and just tons of crap going on. But what is unique to the Warring States period, and again 500 to 200 or so, is that commoners, let's say like myself, could rise up and take over some land. So imagine with me, I live in Phelps County, I live in Rollo. Most of y'all probably in Franklin County. But I could rise up, I could get my buddies together, we could take over Phelps County. If we were not happy with how the ruling family was running Missouri, let's say. And so, let's say we're paying our taxes to the state of Missouri. They're not fixing our roads and taking care of our highways during the snowstorms and everything like they're supposed to with our tax dollars. And so we get pissed off and we rise up. We take over. Me and my friends take over Phelps County, and then we expand to the surrounding counties, and we take over Franklin County. And y'all would be like paying your taxes to me. And I would be fixing the roads. I would be running things. I would kind of be like a mayor over my own Gifford land, or whatever I called it. And y'all would complain to me when I don't fix your roads. And so during the Warring States period, not only were these same big dynasties, the Shang dynasty, Zhou dynasty, Qin dynasty, not only were they warring, but then tons of little civil wars, little battles, little riots, little rebellions were popping up all over the place all the time. And so a very, very, very tumultuous time in Chinese history. Now, each of these dynasties had their own money. They would not recognize the money of the other dynasties, obviously. And so this led to some problems and what really caused some of the battles and wars and riots and rebellions. Because imagine you've got your life savings, and let's say you've got $100,000, and then all of a sudden another family takes over your area. That money is now worthless. Absolutely worthless. And so you would be kind of annoyed by that, and rightfully so. Thus, the Qin Emperor, the first emperor of ancient China, who put an end to the Warring States period. 221, everybody kind of agrees on that date, 221. They say 206. I'll have 201 on your handout for you, and we'll talk about that again later. But this very brief period brought an end to the Warring States period, and indeed united China with one language, one money. Very important to the history of China for that. And we even see this because if you go back to your translation guide, Qin, because Q is CH, and if you throw an A on the end of that, CHINA. China is named after this first emperor, who brought a very swift end to the Warring States period in 221 BC BCE. Now, this guy, total psychopath. Oh my God. Completely crazy, total power-hungry megalomaniac is the phrase I read about him most. He probably assassinated a lot of his family to take over, probably killed a bunch of people trying to become his stepfather, certainly killed his brothers and such so he could take over, and probably killed some of his kids so they didn't get the idea of taking over before his time was up. So murdered tons of his own family members to take power, maintain power, but he also did some other stuff. So, for example, he finished the Great Wall of China. It was fragmented, it was segmented, where there were just openings, which is a perfectly great military strategy, and this is what it was for. The Mongols up north would try to come down, steal resources, steal land, and such. But everybody would be funneled through a smaller opening in the Great Wall of China, and so you just position your army on the other side, on your side of the Great Wall of China, and sit there and shoot them with bows and arrows and crossbows as they come through. Because they're funneled into a smaller area. And that's a great military strategy. But he finished it. He built it, completed it, and really added to its fortification and strength against the countries up north there. So he did finish the Great Wall of China. He also is the one who gave us the terracotta armies, terracotta soldiers. Well, these rows are kind of an Eastern way of doing archaeology. In the West, we do more of checkerboard, and so this would be squares instead of rows here. But the reason is technology will advance, and so you don't dig up everything. You wait for technology to advance. Indeed, in the last 60, 70 years since we discovered the terracotta soldiers, we started using more things like x-rays, with more portable x-ray machines and sonar to figure out where stuff is, so you know you can safely dig down 3 feet without disturbing anything, and then you more carefully start to excavate the things. Well, the terracotta warriors were created by the Qing Emperor, and to do this, he, not Henry Ford, invented the assembly line method of manufacturing. Each of these terracotta warriors has a 100% unique face, but they almost all have the same torso, or I guess I should say there might be 3 or 4 different torsos with the hands in different positions to hold different weapons, where there might be a sword in one, a spear in another. Here you see hands crossed, hands open here, where you could have like a sword in the hand. But again, here's kind of positioned at a 90-degree angle, and most of them are kind of straight down. But a few different types of legs, a few different types of torsos assembled together, and then 100% unique faces. Well, and you can see this in the faces. Horses and such too, a couple different styles of horses or whatever. So a human being was killed for each of these. Pretty psychotic, as I said. He put their chi, it's not really a soul, but we'll get into that here in a second. He put a chi in it. And so this army stands over him in the netherworld to protect him still, thousands of years later. So he is the one who created the assembly line method and the terracotta warriors, the terracotta army that we see here in these pictures. So the Qing Emperor brought a swift end to the Warring States period, united China with one money, one language, finished the Great Wall of China, and really changed Chinese history to the point where China is still named after him, obviously. Well, the Han Dynasty takes over after the Qing Emperor's 15, 20 years of ruling, and the Han Dynasty was basically 200 BC, BCE to 280 or CE. They're not on your map here, but they kind of had that 400 years on both sides of that shift. So I want to finish up this lecture and give you the big picture of the Chinese mindset and things with the Qi and Tai Chi. Now, the ancestor worship, also called filial piety, piety, holiness, righteousness maybe, and filial family, or ancestor worship. So we have a Qi, which is our inner energy, our vital energy, our vital force. And it's not a soul. The main difference in a Western view of a soul and the more Eastern version of a Qi is the Qi is not eternal. But it is immortal in the sense that it survives the death of the body. And so what we do is we practice things like Tai Chi. Tai Chi, you might be familiar with TV shows or movies, seeing older Asian people in a park, maybe at sunup, moving very methodically into different positions and focusing on their breathing, and it's a diet as well. But Tai Chi strengthens our Qi here and now in this life. And that makes it survive longer when our body dies and our Qi goes to the netherworld, goes to the other side, we could say. It continues to exist. based on how strong we made it here in this life. Now, when our body dies and we go to the netherworld, our chi goes to the netherworld, our family then takes over providing for us. They buy what is called hell money, and it's not hell. The netherworld is not hell, but it is translated as hell money. So they would go to a shaman, a holy person, and buy what I've again most read as whimsically large banknotes. So you give the shaman a $10 bill, and they give you a $1 million bill of hell money, and they're full of bright colors, have beautiful drawings and paintings and things on them. But you might give them $100, and they give you $1 trillion hell money banknote, and you take it home to your shrine, and you burn it, and that kind of deposits it in Grandma or Grandpa's bank account on the netherworld, and there they can use that money to buy food and whatever else, because you if you're wealthy enough to have an extra bedroom, you could set up a whole village for them with casinos and bars and whorehouses and stores and everything for them to continue their life on the other side. And so the oldest family member on the other side stays in charge, where it's a matriarchal or patriarchal system, because the person with the strongest chi would be in charge, because they made it stronger here in this life, and it's still strong on the other side because the living family is still providing for them. And so you do things like Tai Chi here, special diets, special breathing exercises to strengthen your chi, and when your body dies, you go to the other side. So ancestor worship is a big part of Chinese culture, Taoist history, Confucianism, we'll see. But again, this is kind of Chinese way of life stuff. And so if you see in TV and movies the picture, the portrait, the painting of an ancestor 2-3 generations back, they're not just remembering them, they are absolutely worshiping them. They are thanking them, they are honoring them for taking care of them, the younger generations here in this life, this world, and now you provide for them on the other side. So the chi, very fascinating. I have a video or two on Canvas for you for the forums that are just absolutely fascinating to me. I love some of that stuff. Well, the Tao. The Tao is divided into yin and yang, and you're probably familiar with yin and yang, and I suppose that's why I didn't pull up a picture of it, because almost everybody knows it. But yin represents the black half with the white hole, earth and moon, female living, coolness, damp, shadows, and gui, kind of a G or K sound, and that doesn't really happen very often in the West, but gui. We'll talk about that here in a second. Yang represents the white half, the black hole, heaven, sun, male, death, warmth, dryness, light, and Shen. So what we have is, when your chi goes to the other side, goes to the netherworld, it starts out as Shen. This is a happy, blessing spirit, we could call it. Now, when your family starts to forget you, they stop remembering you, honoring you, worshiping you, providing for you, and your chi starts to weaken, it starts to die off for good, it transforms into gui. And these are not good and bad spirits. These are not good and evil spirits. Don't think of good and bad, good and evil in the Western sense in anything in Taoism or Confucianism. Shen is the happy, blessing spirit, and Gui is the ornery, the mischievous spirit, Chi. And so a Chi strengthened here in this life starts out as Shin, if it's strong enough on the other side, it starts to break down. It starts to die. It is fighting against this dying. It is annoyed that their family members are forgetting them, and so it acts out, becomes mischievous. And ornery, starts messing with its family members. And so imagine with me, if you will, how a student, a young student like yourself, would be studying for finals coming up here in a little bit. You, as possibly a good Taoist, would leave your classes, go home and study for the afternoon, eat a healthy dinner, and then take some time, take 10 or 15, 20 minutes to worship your family members, to remember them, to provide for them, and honor them. And then they would watch over you as you spend a few more moments reviewing your notes in the evening, go to bed. They would watch over you, protect you, help you drift off to sleep peacefully, without anxiety in your mind running and things about the finals the next day. And you would sleep well. You wouldn't toss and turn all night. You would wake up feeling rested. You would review your notes, come to class, and knock the finals out of the park. However, if you have been screwing around and you didn't use your time wisely these last couple weeks, and you're cramming all this information into your head before the night before your final, then you're probably going to grab some fast food. You don't have time to respect your family members. You would cram stuff into your brain that's not really going to stick, and you would try to go to bed. Why should your family members watch over you? Why should the good, happy, blessing Shin watch over you? Well, they're not going to. And so the older generations that are dying off, the Gui, are going to mess with you. They're going to screw with your head, screw with your mind, so you can't fall asleep peacefully, and you're going to toss and turn all night and wake up all the time, and you're going to wake up feeling like crap. If you remember your family members, the Shin will protect you from the Gui, from the mischievous, ornery ones who are dying. And once they die, they're gone. They're gone for good. That's it. And so this is how Shin and Gui work with the Qi. But what we're going to see is everything is divided into yin or yang. You must memorize these basic ones. However, just to show you, in my copy of the Tao Te Ching again, there is a much more comprehensive list. Oh, look at that. There's a picture of yin and yang. And here's the list I'm about to read you. Yin represents, and some of these are on your list here, yin, night, dark, rain, water, cold, winter, autumn, odd numbers, the moon, northwest, right, down, intuitive, passive, static, contraction, decreasing, conservative, traditional, valleys, rivers, curves, soft, solidifying, psychological, tigers, kidneys, heart, liver, lungs. And so the opposite of all those things is yang, representing day, light, fire, heat, summer, spring, even numbers, the sun, south, east, left, up, intellect, active, dynamic, expansion, increasing, innovative, compared to yin, conservative, yang again, reformative, compared to yin, traditional, yang, mountain, desert, straight line, hard, dissolving, physical, as opposed to yin was psychological, remember, dragons, bladder, skin, intestines. And so again, don't try to memorize that list, just memorize these ones that I have for you here on this. But the idea is the Tao is divided into yin and yang. Everything is either yin or yang. And with the circle, we kind of get this flowing pattern. One thing is always becoming something else. For example, cool, damp. You can even say like the morning is cool and damp, and then the light comes up, the sun comes up, and it becomes warmer, and the humidity goes down and becomes dry. Or, big picture, the coolness of fall, winter, becomes the warmth of spring, summer, which goes back to the coolness of fall and winter. Likewise, we have the raining seasons, the dry seasons. We have light becomes dark, dark becomes light, light becomes dark, dark becomes light. Mountains become valleys, which become mountains, which become valleys. Rivers or anything are curvy, and then they become straight, and then they go back to curvy for a while, and then they become straight. And so everything is always becoming something else. Yin is always becoming yang, yang is becoming yin, yang is becoming yin, yin becomes yang. In this pattern, this process of nature. And again, the Tao is best translated, or most often translated, as the way, the pattern, the process, the force of nature, or indeed the force from Star Wars. And so if you remember when we were talking about the lectures on Jesus, how when he returns he will come walking on the clouds. Thus in Star Wars we have Luke Skywalker as the hero there. And we have then the force, the Taoist force. Because all of Star Wars is really kind of Eastern versus Western philosophy, religion, whatever you want to say there. So I don't do Star Wars. It's not bad, but it's just not my thing. And so yin is always becoming yang, yang is becoming yin in this pattern, this process of nature. Well, quickly, and we're almost done. We have the 5 elements in the ancient Chinese world. In Taoism, most of them look familiar: water, fire, earth, wood, and metal. And I bring these up to show you, once again, how everything is working together in nature. Well, for example, when you combine water and earth, you get wood. Wood trees grow out of earth. Metal comes from the earth. You use fire to melt metal, shape it, to chop down wood. You add fire to wood, you get earth or soot or ash. Water puts out fire. Water erodes, moves earth. And so you could keep going, but you see this pattern, this process, this force of nature, and how they're working together, they're coming from each other, and this is nature. This is nature, and all this is very spontaneous. Spontaneous. So, spontaneity is huge in Taoism because nature is very spontaneous. Nature is very spontaneous. Even though it might be winter or summer, especially in Missouri, you know how crazy the weather is. We will literally have 70-degree weather in the same 5, 7, 10-day forecast as 20 and 30-degree weather. In the last 10 days, it has been both 70 and 19. And you know, in Missouri, that could really be fall, spring, or winter. And so there's no telling there. And you can think of summer storms where you wake up and there's a beautiful, peaceful, calm morning, and then out of nowhere, a horrible storm, tornadoes, winds, chaos in the day's weather. And then it's back to really the most beautiful sunset from all the rain and storms and clouds, and calm, peaceful evening. The weather is very spontaneous. Nature is very spontaneous. And so a good Taoist will live this spontaneous lifestyle, living the lifestyle of spontaneity, because we are mimicking nature there. And children, young children are always the best example of this in Taoist text, the best examples I've read about, because babies are, cheese and crackers, spontaneous. They are all calm and sweet and cuddly, and then they just start screaming. Oh my God, they start screaming. and you feed them and they're happy again, and then they pass out and they're all just cute and warm and snuggly and peaceful, and then they wake up and they go nuclear. They are just screaming their heads off and crying and yelling, and oh my god. And you change its diaper, and then all of a sudden it is the cutest little warm and cuddly little bundle of joy. And then that roly-poly chubby-cheeked poo machine then gets angry again because it's hungry, or it poops again, or whatever, and it screams, and then it's changed, and it's just a loving little critter again. So, children, and we'll see some quotes from some of the scriptures with using children as examples. The master is the one who does not lose their childlike heart, it says. And so this is kind of an introduction to the Chinese way of life, the way of nature that we see in Taoism. So next time we'll get into the text, we'll get into Lao Tzu. But there it is, the Chinese way of life, for us to start off the last test material in this class. Until next time, make wise choices.